you're adjusting the snare, it's tempting, it's instinctive to think your job is to listen to the snare. But it's actually not. In that moment, when you're adjusting the snare, your job, if you can get your head around it, is to listen to everything else and how the changes in the snare are affecting the whole picture. Welcome to After Hours. My name is Gregory Scott. Tonight, I want to throw an exercise at you that I think could bend your mind sideways. It may be the most challenging exercise I've thrown at you yet, but I think you're up to it. And before I lay it down, I want to just remind you of something we've talked about in a couple of the previous videos, which is perspective. One of the traps that mixers fall into of all skill sets, but especially people who are earlier in their career path, is their focus is too small and narrow. And one of the tricks to this game is to learn how to pull back and hear everything, hear the whole picture, and hear what's working and what's not working, have a sense of what to do about it maybe. But getting this perspective is critical. And one of the reasons that people get lost in the small picture perspective we've talked about already, which is they spend too much time on something, so they're not mixing fast enough. But here's the money. One of the hardest things that I ever learned to do when mixing was how to listen to everything except the thing that I was adjusting. If you think about this for a second, if you're adjusting the snare, it's tempting, it's instinctive to think your job is to listen to the snare. But it's actually not. In that moment, when you're adjusting the snare, your job, if you can get your head around it, is to listen to everything else and how the changes in the snare are affecting the whole picture. So, the exercise, if you haven't guessed it at this point in time, the next time you sit down to mix, I want you to do your best to not listen to the things that you're adjusting. Now, there's two ways to go about that. The first is you can attempt to just take in everything else that's going on, just defocus. So if you're adjusting the vocal, you just kind of listen to the whole thing and you're like, all right, you know you've got a high frequency EQ, and you know you're adjusting it on the voice, but what's happening with the drums? Something else that's got high frequencies, because the high frequencies in the voice will affect how you perceive the high frequencies in the drums. So you can defocus and just listen to the thing that you're adjusting on some other elements. You could listen to the complement. What I mean by that is if you're adjusting the treble on something like a vocal or the drums, you listen to the other end of the spectrum. So if you're adjusting 10K, listen to 100 hertz. What's happening at 100 hertz when I'm adjusting 10K? If you think of 1K as the center of your mix, frequency-wise, and you can just take a plugin and open the plugin window and look at the graph of frequencies there, and you'll notice 1K is in the middle. This is a logarithmic spread, so we're going to go down here to 20 and up here to 20K. So when you're defocusing, what you can do is you can say, okay, if I'm adjusting something in the 2K range, that's one octave up from 1K. Listen down at 500 hertz. What's going on down there? It's a tricky I'm going to do a video on that because that deserves its own conversation there, complementary frequencies. Focusing in here. That's one thing you can do. You can defocus and try to take it all in. But the problem with that is if you were able to defocus and take it all in, you probably wouldn't need this exercise. So that leads us to option B. Option B is a form of meditation. I swear. I meditate every day of my life. And meditation is easier than what I'm about to ask you to do. And that's pick one sound that is constant through the mix. The snare is a great one, or the kick drum, the bass, the vocal. Pick one. And that's all you focus on. No matter what you're doing, focus on that one. Just try that for one pass of the song or for one pass of the section. What you're probably going to find happens, it's the same thing that happens to all of us who meditate, is that your mind drifts. You've got this point of focus. In meditation, it's the mantra, and in this exercise, it's the snare drum. And 2, 4, 6 beats in, you're listening to something other than the snare drum. You're listening to what you're adjusting. You're listening to something else in the mix that's caught your attention that you got a critical judgment about or whatnot. That's all right. As with meditation, all you need to do is notice when your attention is drifted from the object of focus and bring it back. Just go, oh, I'm not listening to the snare. Let me focus on the snare again. This exercise, this practice, if you will, I'm not advising that this is how you have to mix. I certainly listen to the thing I'm adjusting all the time. But that's because I know how to not do it. And I know when to not do it. And I don't always listen to the thing I'm adjusting. It depends on what I'm adjusting and why. But for now, you've got to get this other skill in your toolbox. You've got to be able to adjust the snare drum and hear what that's doing to the hi-hats and the sibilance and the vocal. You've got to be able to adjust the bass while listening to the kick drum. That's a really, really good one. You listen to one deep bass instrument while adjusting the other, because those relationships are so critical and fundamental, and most of us struggle with those. Part of the reason is because you don't know how to listen to the other thing when you're adjusting this thing. So work on that. It will change your life. It will change your mixes. It's probably also going to have an effect on your experience of the world outside of mixing, but we'll leave that for another video. Enjoy.